Continue our tradition of starting on time. Welcome to the June 25th hearing of the California Transportation Commission. We're delighted that each of you are with us today. Let's start with a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Alvarado. Yes, sir. Commissioner Simmons. Commissioner Burke. Commissioner Dunn. Commissioner Hart. Here. Commissioner Fromer. Commissioner Galmetti. Commissioner Inman. Here. Commissioner Medaffer. Here. Commissioner Taglioni. Yes, present. Chair Gardino.
Present. We have a quorum to conduct business today. To note, the 3 resolutions of necessity, which do require at least 8 votes, will be pulled because we do not have 8 votes in which to move forward unless any of our commissioners want to vote with both hands. Seeing none, we will move those items. I think they're items 49, 50, and 51 in your book under the consent calendar. We will move those to our August meeting. With that, let's move on to item number 2, the always controversial and heatedly debated approval of minutes from our last meeting. There's a motion by Commissioner Taglioni, seconded by Commissioner Medaffer. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Whew, glad we got that one out of the way. Let's move on. Executive Director's report. Andre.
Mr. Chair, I will pass on the report today. Thank you for the opportunity.
That was an excellent report. Thank you for that scintillating update. Commission reports. Do any of my colleagues have reports? Great. At this pace, we're going to be adjourning by 12:45. Let's move on to commissioners' meetings for compensation. Motion by Commissioner Alvarado, seconded by Commissioner Taglioni. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And that passes. We're joined today by a Deputy Director for Secretary Brian Kelly, who is new to the agency and new to California. Chad, we'd love for you to introduce yourself and provide us with an update.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that introduction, and it's good to be in California. I came out here from the East Coast back in January, and I'm very much enjoying the work so far at the Transportation Agency. I will present a brief report on behalf of Secretary Kelly and really focus on the developments since the last meeting of the CTC, the most significant of which I would like to mention is the on-time passage of the 14-15 budget and the very significant appropriations it makes for transportation purposes, both in this coming fiscal year and on an ongoing basis. In the coming fiscal year, it is especially notable we are repaying a general fund loan early, providing $351 million to help preserve and maintain California roads. In addition, significant bond funding is allocated for intercity rail and transit capital investments, and new funding is appropriated from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund for high-speed rail, intercity rail, and transit, as well as in support of building sustainable communities through affordable housing, public transit, and active transportation investments. I would also like to highlight the significance of Senate Bill 862, which continuously appropriated 35% of cap-and-trade revenues beginning in 15-16 for the Transportation, Affordable Housing, and Sustainable Communities Program, and 25% for the High-Speed Rail Authority. Of these funds, 10% are for the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, and CalSTA and Caltrans will be working with CTC in the administration of this program. We believe these are historic investments that set the state on a course to transform passenger rail and make significant investments in transit throughout California, and we plan to engage the other state agencies, the legislature, and rail and transit stakeholders throughout the state as we develop guidelines for the awarding of funds. We look forward to working with the CTC on this matter, and are delighted that this is passed in the last few weeks. So thank you very much for the opportunity to provide this brief report. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Chad, thank you. Colleagues, any questions of Chad? Thank you, Chad, and welcome again to California. I believe Norma is going to provide us with the report for Malcolm, who's not with us today, for Caltrans.
Correct. Thank you. Norm Ortega here on behalf of Director Doherty. He's in D.C. and sends his regrets for not being able to attend today. I'm going to start off with a brief update on some personnel issues. We recently appointed Dennis Agar to, we recently appointed Dennis Agar to the position of the Caltrans District 10 Director. Dennis is a graduate of Sac State and is a licensed professional engineer with the state of California, and he has over 24 years of experience in the department in a variety of different positions, both at headquarters and in the district. Most recently, Dennis served as a division chief for traffic operations. There's been a lot of activity going on in that area. So to backfill him temporarily while we fill the position, Sean Nazari from our District 4 Bay Area office is filling in behind him, and he's the Deputy Director for Operations in the Bay Area. As you noted at the last meeting, Jody Jones is retiring this week, and filling in behind her will be John Rodriguez, who is the Deputy District Director for Construction in District 3, until we fill the position permanently, and we're moving forward with scheduling interviews quickly. Just wanted to highlight a few notable projects. Jody leaves on a very high note. There were a couple projects one here in Sacramento, the Fix 50 that some of you may be aware of. Here in downtown Sacramento, we closed off parts of I-50 in downtown Sacramento, and the project was completed early. There were a lot of challenges, but all of our partners, the commuters, all worked with us, and I think the project went very, very well. Also in District 3, there was a ribbon cutting for the Feather River Bridge just recently on 99 between Yuba City and Sacramento, and there's about 16,000 drivers that use this stretch of freeway, and it is will be a big safety improvement. That project was funded with with Prop 1B funds as well as recovery funds. And in Southern California, Malcolm and Carey and Metro took part in a groundbreaking for the I-10 HOV lane project down in Baldwin Park, and it's the second of 3 projects that, once completed, will offer a continuous HOV lane from downtown Los Angeles to the I-15 in San Bernardino. There's several items that are being presented by staff today. Certainly, one that is very, very timely is the Willits Bypass, and Charlie Fielder from our District 1 office will provide us with the latest update. We had a few setbacks this week, and he'll be able to share that information with all of us. Thank you.
Norma, thank you. Questions of Norma? Fran Inman?
Norma, the Federal Highways has issued their call for a survey on projects of national and regional significance, and within their survey are transit agencies, our tribal governments, and also our DOT is asked to put forward the listing. And it's a pretty short turnaround. I think there's been some confusion amongst all of us in terms of we thought we'd done that kind of activity, and come to find out there is a lot of work. So I think you told me earlier that Comey is working on this, and I don't see him yet. So maybe we can defer those questions because the survey is due before we meet again.
Correct. And he should be here shortly, but we do have an effort through our planning program and have reached out to our districts and our partners to be able to put some information together. I don't have any more information than that, but I think Comey's staff is working on it.
Well, I think it would be good, too, if we can at some point maybe gather together from California all of the submissions that have been turned in. DOT is required to report to Congress by October, but also there appears to be ongoing discussion of what the son of MAP 21 might look like and when, and that there likely will be some discussion around PNRS. So I just want to make sure that we're represented. We put our name on every list that anybody is ever going to look at. So
I saw the start of the list, and there are a lot of significant projects for California on the list, and we definitely are working on this issue.
Okay, and if we have any transit agency partners that are with us today or watching us online, make sure that you do take a look, and if you have a project that should be on there, And then from the Office of the Secretary, maybe with our tribal liaison to make sure, I'm not aware of any projects that we would have that would be candidates from our tribal partners, but once again, I just don't want us to be left off the list. And then my next question, Norma, for you is, I think the last weekly estimate from DOT was that the Highway Trust Fund may be bankrupt as soon as August 29th. And in my meetings in D.C. on my National Freight Advisory, there's discussion about the fact that the Highway Trust Fund cannot go into the red. So I'm not sure if we're going to see any slow pays or anything, but I would assume that there's probably some contingency planning going on, and are we prepared if we get to that crisis, and what would it mean for our projects?
We have been looking into this issue. We don't have any further guidance from FHWA on whether they're making partial payments or how much. Stephen will be covering that in the next presentation, but certainly it's something that we're looking at and tracking very closely. The director has also signed a letter to Congress urging quick resolution of the issue. And there will be some recommendations that we will make to the Commission about whether we allocate if there isn't a prompt solution. So Stephen will be covering that in more detail in his next presentation.
Norma, thank you. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing none, Norma, the only thing I would mention, Dennis, promotion in District 10. I think sometimes we talk in shorthand. So for folks in our audience who may not know where District 10 is.
Excuse me. Thank you. I appreciate that. District 10 covers the Stockton area and a number of other counties in that general area. It goes up into we several counties, and it borders. I'm sorry, Rachel. Tuolumne, San Joaquin. My apologies.
This is the audience participation portion of our program today. Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, Norma was going to call in a lifeline on that.
Yep,
one.
that's
and
exactly
did very well.
There's a lot.
Norma, thank you for joining us today. And regrettably, we will have no report from the FHWA today. Vincent Mamano is, I believe, taping on Comedy Central today, so he will not be with us. We'll look forward to his remarks in August. Let's move on to our local reports. Is Adrian Cardozo with us today? Excellent. For our regional agencies moderator report.
Good morning, Chair Gardino. Is this on? And Commissioners, Adrian Cardozo with OCTA, also this year's RTPA moderator. The RTPA group met here yesterday in Sacramento and discussed a number of items, including several on today's agenda. Related to the budget and allocation item, the RTPAs are encouraged to see loan repayments coming back to transportation and are hopeful that additional repayments or bid savings might lead to new funds becoming available to fund Tier 2 TCRP projects in the future that have been waiting for state-committed funding for a long time. We are also interested to see how the cap-and-trade funding programs will be developed and implemented. Finally, related to this, we are very concerned about the state of the Federal Highway Trust Fund, as was just mentioned, and the projections that the funds will run out before the end of this federal fiscal year. We heard a report from MTC on STIP performance measures and MTC's evaluation and feedback, which was based on a similar report they did for the CTIF subcommittee that is looking at potential recommendations for the 2016 STIP guidelines. The RTPA group also heard an update on the progress CTC staff has made in developing the 2016 STIP guidelines, and we want to thank Laurel and Lori Waters for their work and for involving us directly in the process, and also for starting this process so early. The RTPA has established a work group, and one of the things that we're working on to provide is an RTIP submittal template, so that all of the agencies will submit an RTIP that looks similar, is consistent, and hopefully that will make it a little bit easier to compile data and create a summary. We also got an update on the ATP program, and we want to commend April Nitsos and her staff with Caltrans for putting together a well-organized review and scoring process. This is a daunting task, and Caltrans has managed it and has a plan in place to deliver recommendations on schedule. Finally, I am very happy to announce that the RTPAs have elected a new moderator and vice moderator for fiscal year 14-15. These positions rotate annually between Southern California and Northern California representation. Can you guys stand up for me, please? Next year's moderator representing Northern California agencies is Renee DeVere Oki from Sacramento COG, or SACOG. And the new vice moderator representing Southern California agencies is Sarkis Kachek with Santa Barbara CAG. So Renee will do the presentation at our next meeting in August. I want to thank you for your patience and listening to my reports on behalf of the RTPA group this last year. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Adrienne, I've never seen you smile so broadly. In my faith tradition, there would have been a puff of white smoke going along with that announcement, but thank you for mentioning it. Renee and Sarkos, congratulations to you, or condolences, whichever you prefer. We look forward to hearing from you at our August meeting. Colleagues, any questions from our regional moderator? Hearing none, our Rural Counties Task Force Chair is Sharon. Here? Good. Sharon, welcome.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I have to have my glasses here. I've got a couple things written down. This is going to be my last report as well. And I'm smiling. Maybe not as much as Adrienne. I wanted to talk a little bit about the federal budget. It is a key issue for the rural agencies in particular. This is the height of construction season, and if there's a protracted negotiation for the Highway Trust Fund, it could inordinately impact the rural agencies that don't really have very large bank accounts to cover that. Secondly, we have been very much involved with the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking with MAP 21. In MAP 21, in the planning sections, there is extensive discussion about rural agencies in the country, and basically they're kind of going along the same lines that we have here in the state, where we have rural agencies that are represented as well as the MPOs, so we're keeping a close eye on that. We've been working closely analyzing the bills that came forward this session with the STIP, as well as working with your staff on the 2016 STIP guidelines, as well as the CTIP STIP reform group. We're very interested in looking at how performance measures will be used to analyze the STIP in upcoming sessions that you'll have. We've been working very hard. Dan Landon with Nevada County is leading an effort for the rural counties to look at our local streets and road and our pavement and how we would use that as a performance measure. In terms of cap and trade, we've been following that. We're very appreciative of the transit aspects of that. We will also be working closely with the Strategic Growth Council on the guidelines they're putting forward in that program, so that sustainability also includes what you might consider that in a rural part of the state. We'd like to express our appreciation to your staff for the work that they have done, as well as Caltrans, on the over 700 applications they're reviewing for the ATP program. And we're very anxious to see what the outcome of that will be coming up this August when it comes before you. We'd also like to thank the Caltrans Division of Mass Transportation. They've helped fund a coordinated human services plan contract that will help half of our rural counties develop our plans, which allows the flow of funding for the Federal Transit Administration. And then I would also like to announce our elected representatives for the Rural Counties Task Force. Jerry Barton with El Dorado County. Jerry, if you could stand up. He will be your incoming chair, and I can vouch for his skill and capability. And then someone who is familiar to you is Maura Toomey, and she will be our vice chair incoming for the rural counties. And lastly, Adam Hansen from Tehama County will be our secretary. And on a personal note, I would like to add that I always am thankful that the Commission understands that it's important to look out for the entire state for building, operating, and maintaining the transportation, not just for things like greenhouse gases, but also for essential lifeline services that we need in our communities. So thank you very much.
Sharon, don't go too
questions?
far away in case there are questions of my colleagues. We're going to let you off easy then in your last meeting. Thanks again for your
Okay.
service this past year. And Jerry and Maura, thank you for taking on the new role.
Okay.
Let's move forward with our Self-Help Counties Coalition Chair. Andy? That looks a lot more like Keith than Andy.
Yes,
Keith, why don't you go ahead and identify yourself for the record?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Keith Dunn here on behalf of the Self-Help Counties Coalition. It's my pleasure to give you our report. I want to do a couple things. I would like to, rather than reiterate the comments of the regional and the rural counties, I would just like to concur with their statements. We've participated in the STIP programming, and we're very concerned about the federal program, and would agree with all the statements that were made. Appreciative to your staff for the STIP work group. We think that's a positive step in the right direction. We're looking forward to participating and appreciate that. I want to just take a brief minute before I get into the rest of my comments and just publicly acknowledge the loss of a good friend of the Self-Help Counties. Many of you in this room, Caroline Rodman, who tragically passed away recently. She was a great advocate for transportation, an all-around wonderful person, and she will be missed greatly by many of us. The Self-Help Counties Coalition, in conjunction with CTF, will be hosting a reception honoring her, working with CTF to raise money for a scholarship foundation in conjunction with the wishes of her spouse. So I just wanted to take a brief moment to acknowledge a dear friend that we lost unexpectedly. I will look forward to working with my staff and with many of you in the room to make sure that we properly remember her and are able to encourage young women who would like to go into transportation and to be in this business to have that opportunity. So I just want to thank you for your indulgence, but wanted to make sure I got to say that. Moving on to my report, like I said, endorsing the comments of our colleagues before, I just want to touch on a couple items that will be talked about later. I've handed out some information. The Self-Help Counties group has been actively working with the administration and the department and trying to look at the funding crisis that we all know is coming, and I'll offer some additional comments on item 17 a little further. But you know, we part of the discussions that shape how we build and fund projects have been taking place not only through the new agency but also in the legislature. I was pleased to see your staff making recommendations on a number of proposals that are moving through the legislature. The Self-Help Counties has been able to work with legislative staff, and I think that a lot of the policies that have been coming out recently that you'll be talking about later, 486, 1080, 1077, that look at the RUC fees and different ways that the STIP and SHOP operate are positive. We'll continue to participate both in the legislature and with the the agency and the department to just try and find a place that provides the best opportunities for all participants to be successful. So with that, I'd just like to close out and thank you for your time and answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions of Keith? Keith Dunn, thank you for making the report today. And why don't we adjourn today's meeting in memory of Caroline Rodman as well. Let's move on, please, to policy matters, state and federal legislative matters. Carrie.
Commissioners, agenda item 12 is an action item, and you should have a pink at your desk. This Friday, June 27th, is the last day for policy committees to meet. The legislature will be on summer recess from July 3rd through August 4th. The last day for bills to pass out of fiscal committee will be August 15th, and the last day for each house to pass bills is August 31st. 22 of the bills that staff was monitoring did not pass out of their house of origin by the May 30th deadline, reducing the number of bills staff is currently tracking to 48, as presented in Attachment A of your book item. Out of the 48 bills we are monitoring, staff is recommending the Commission take a support position on the following 5 bills. After each item, we will be asking for your vote. SB 151, DeSaulnier, requires the Commission to allocate funding for all capital and support costs for SHOP projects, as well as supplemental allocations for projects that exceed approved allocations. The Commission is committed to improving the accountability and transparency of the programming, allocation, administration, and delivery of transportation projects. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position to support SB 151 and direct staff to transmit the letter of support included in your book item to the author.
Move staff recommendation.
We have a motion. We have a motion by Commissioner Arp and a second by Commissioner Taglioni on SB 151 by Mark Desaulnier. Is there further discussion? If I may recommend that we also continue to work with Secretary Kelly and the agency on the language to make sure that as we support this bill, it is the best vehicle for the accountability and transparency which the bill tries to capture. If that's okay with the maker and seconder of the motion, why don't we go ahead? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? And that passes. Thank you. Carrie?
SB 486, Desaulnier, as recently amended, would require the Commission to develop and adopt specific performance goals and objectives to encourage a stronger performance management approach within Caltrans. It also requires the Commission to provide guidance to Caltrans with respect to the development of the California Transportation Plan, approve development of Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, and establish guidelines for Caltrans to follow in the development and the selection of SHOP projects, including a public venue for the vetting of both the ITIP and the SHOP. SB 486 would establish mechanisms to increase transparency in the long-range transportation planning and programming processes undertaken by Caltrans. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a support position for SB 486 and direct staff to transmit to the author the letter of support included in your book item.
So move approval of the comment.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Medaffer and a second by Commissioner Arp. Commissioner Medaffer, you wanted to address the item?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The only question or concern that I had to do with respect to the bill, and perhaps that's something that kind of what you alluded to in SB 151, is just to make sure that CTC didn't get into a situation where we're programming projects or specifically working on programming. It seems as though monitoring and overseeing and being that public venue makes sense, but I think we also ought to make sure that we're sensitive that we're not directing projects and programming in any regard.
Director Boutros?
Commissioners, if I may, Commissioner Medaffer, just to make sure we're clear on the comment. The STIP is programmed and adopted by the Commission. The ITIP is adopted by the Commission, so that is within the existing authority vested within the Commission. The SHOP is developed and adopted by Caltrans and approved by the Commission, and I think the proposed statutes, the proposed bill doesn't really change that fact,
okay,
except for the Commission giving guidance to Caltrans and actually overseeing the delivery of the projects and allocating funds. So there are programming requirements that the Commission will maintain. So I don't want to.
No, and I wouldn't be suggesting that go away. I just didn't want to add on to anything that, especially in the SHOP area, that would cause some problems.
Yes.
Great. Commissioner Medaffer, thank you for that clarification. And again, I think the way that we best move forward is, if we approve this, to communicate that to the legislature while continuing to work with the Secretary and the agency to make sure that this is developed in a way that's best for the ultimate goal of accountability and transparency with taxpayer dollars. Great. With that, if there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously. The next bill, Carrie?
SB 983, Hernandez, removes the limitation on the number of approved high-occupancy toll lanes currently prescribed in statute and places responsibility on the Commission to review and approve hot lane applications. SB 983 increases the opportunity for the state and regions to utilize hot lanes and contribute to the development of consistent statewide congestion management policies to promote connectivity, efficiency, and reliability of California's transportation system. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support for SB 983 and direct staff to transmit the letter to the author included in your book item.
There's a motion by Commissioner Taglioni, and was that Commissioner Alvarado? No, Commissioner Medaffer, who made the second. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? That's unanimous. Carrie?
SB 1298 Hernandez extends LACMTA's hot lane demonstration projects on the I-10 and I-110 indefinitely. SB 1298 combined with SB 983 provides the state and regions with the opportunity to manage congestion and maximize the capacity of existing facilities through hot lane implementation where feasible. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a support position for SB 1298 and directs staff to transmit to the author the letter of support included in your book item.
Motion by Commissioner Inman. Second by Commissioner Taglioni. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That's unanimous. Carrie?
All right. SB 1077 de Saulnier creates a mileage-based fee task force within the Commission to guide in the development and implementation of a public program to study the potential for a mileage-based user fee as an alternative to the gas tax. The Commission has consistently urged the administration and the legislature to address the need for reliable and sustainable funding to preserve and expand the state's transportation system. SB 1077 is a step towards finding a sustainable solution to our dwindling transportation resources. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support in concept for SB 1077 and directs staff to transmit to the author the letter of support included in your book item.
There's a motion by Commissioner Taglioni, a second by Commissioner Alvarado, and I believe Commissioner Madaffer had a comment.
Thank you very much. Yes, on 1077, the only thing that I would really want to make sure is that the public process stays at CTC. To the extent that this task force in a pilot program makes sense, somebody that is, as a EV driver, I'm very interested in making sure that the public stays involved. So depending on however this is structured, it looks like it goes back to CalStat, and I'm not sure if the Commission has a lot of role in this following the task force. Is there any clarification on that?
We can certainly work with ledge staff to get a clarification, but at this point it appears that there is no reporting back to the Commission.
Yeah, I would just, again, having things in the public light of day, especially something as important as this on any kind of mileage-based fee, I think it's incumbent that, and the forum to me is the CTC, where the public can weigh in. So I would want to make sure that to the extent possible, and I, again, don't know the author's intent here, other than from what I've read, but it would make sense to me as though to the extent we can, I'd like to keep dialogue and discussion on this on every agenda at CTC, and it be something that as we move forward, the public has an opportunity to weigh in on, whether it's the regions, whether it's users, whoever.
Thank you. Other comment or feedback on this motion? Great. Then let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstention? That passes unanimously. Carrie, thank you. Anything else?
Just to close it all out. The staff recommends the Commission accept the staff report and provide direction to staff on any additional legislation included in Attachment A.
Great. Colleagues, any additional legislation that you'd like to direct Carrie and our team to be looking at? Fran, you had a comment.
Well, it's not relating to that. I just want to use this agenda item to, I think Comey has joined us, so since it's a federal matter.
Great. Before we do that, then let's finish with Carrie, then, that we're accepting her report. Is there a motion? There's a motion by Commissioner Taglioni that was seconded quickly by Commissioner Alvarado. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Commissioner Inman.
Comey, welcome. We were talking earlier about the federal highway request for the projects of national and regional significance.
Yes.
Can you give us a little status update of where we are? I heard on the rumor mill that we got a little bit of an extension with the filing deadline. I don't know if you can confirm that or if that's purely a rumor and wishful thinking.
I haven't heard that. It would be good to have an extension. We're set up to input the data by Monday, which is the current deadline that we have. And we have a number of projects that have come in across the state that we're continuing to input right now. The reason we need that much time is each project there's a survey you have to fill out for each project. There are about 16 questions to answer on each project, and we've tried to coordinate across the state with all stakeholders on those projects of national significance.
And then I'd ask earlier if we could at some point in the future maybe compile a list of all of the projects that went in from California, because our transit agencies can submit as well, and I think it will be good. And we're not putting them in a priority order at this point, right?
No, there's
we're
no
just getting our name on the list?
Yeah, there's no priority to it. The federal government will actually prioritize the projects into 3 tiers based on criteria that meet each tier. I think Tier 1 is basically one that meets all of the requirements, and Tier 3 is where you just name a project that doesn't look like it's consistent with the requirements. So, because I think they expect to get all kinds of projects anyway. So we will have a list. We will have a list as much as we know that has come through us, and we've reached out and is reported to us. We'll have that list compiled by close of business on the 30th of June.
So thank you to your team, because it really is, if anybody hasn't gone to the survey, it's not quite so simple as turning in a letter with a project name on the list. So hats off to your team. I think Federal Highways estimated on average it would take a transit agency 40 hours and a DOT 80 hours, and given the fact we like to say California is as big as maybe 7 states, that could be a lot of work for the team. And then I also ask the Office of the Secretary just to reach out to any of our tribal partners. I'm not aware of any project that they would have, but just to make sure that all of our California colleagues are engaged in this, because it came out. I'm not sure how widespread the outreach was on this one, and so I think we all have to make sure that we talk to each other and cover our bases. And since you're here, do you want to give a little update on the freight hearings? I know we're in the process. Just a little reminder.
Yeah, I think we've done a third public meeting. The third one was done on the coast in Marina. My indications are they're all going well. We've had very good press coverage. What we tried to do is have a press announcement ahead of the event. So we've had press at most of the events, and it's been well received. I think we still have to come back and talk about the number of projects that we have listed on the plan. Thank you.
Comey, thank you. Let's move on to agenda item 13. Mitch and Stephen.
Stephen Keck from Caltrans will be making the presentation. After his presentation, I will have a few comments.
Thank you, Mitch. Stephen Keck, welcome.
Thank you. Stephen Keck with Caltrans, and good afternoon. I'm going to start with the traditional look at allocation capacity. This allocation capacity here is the proposed allocation capacity for the next fiscal year, the 2014-15 fiscal year, which begins next week. The total capacity for all programs is $3.4 billion, a little less than that. It is consistent with the capacities estimated by the 2014 fund estimate, which the Commission adopted in August of last year. One thing that's new, or two things that are new for this allocation capacity this year, is an allocation capacity for aeronautics, which is $5 million, and an allocation capacity for the active transportation program, which of course is a new program. This allocation capacity does not include any carryover balances or any advances that have been made in this year. When we come back in August, we will give a final recommended allocation capacity for the year that includes all of that. Federal Highway Trust Fund shortfall, I believe there's a little bit of interest in this item. There are actually two federal issues going on right now. One, of course, is reauthorization. The MAP 21 ends at the end of this fiscal year. But the shortfall of the Federal Highway Trust Fund looms much greater in everybody's mind because of the potential impact. The current estimates show that the Federal Highway Trust Fund will reach insolvency at the end of August, as you mentioned, Commissioner Inman. That estimate is almost a month old now. They update it daily, but they don't really change the estimate. So we're expecting a new one as soon as next week when they have June balances. So we're looking forward to that. Last week, the department and all departments of transportation nationwide received a letter from Secretary Anthony Fox talking about the impacts of the Federal Highway Trust Fund. In that letter, Secretary Fox promised to make payments to states and to local agencies for as long as reasonable. He also indicated that within the next couple of weeks, we would be receiving specific cash flow strategies that the U.S. DOT intends to take. That's very important for us because we can't really analyze in detail what the impacts of the shortfall are going to be until they tell us how they're going to manage their cash flow. There's a few things that they can do. They can immediately halt payments completely until the trust fund regains a significant balance. That's pretty draconian. We've got our fingers crossed they don't do something like that. They could delay payments for some period of time. Right now, they pay us within 24 hours of billing. They may decide to wait a week. They may decide to pay us once a month. That doesn't have a huge impact to us because we're being paid within a month. That's consistent with our other cycles. And the other option that they could choose to take, and of course we don't know what they're going to do, is to pay us proportional to what our requests are. We spend and receive in reimbursement about $320 million a month in federal dollars. That's significant, any way you look at it. In this state, any state, it's a lot of money. If they halt altogether those reimbursements, this state, even with our significant financial resources, wouldn't last very long. We estimate about 2 months. If they pay some sort of ratio, and we looked at the Federal Highway Trust Fund, and we looked at what they spend and what they receive, and we estimate that they receive about 70% of what they spend under the current cash flows. Under that scenario, if they were to turn around and pay us 70% of what we spend, maybe we can last through the first federal fiscal quarter. But again, we don't know exactly what their cash management tools are going to be, and we really need that information to give the Commission, and for my own peace of mind, an accurate look at what we're going to do. As I mentioned, Secretary Fox in his letter did indicate that we would receive those instructions within the next, last week he said within the next few weeks, so I'm saying within the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping that it might coincide with their analysis of the trust fund once they have June cash balances. Any questions on this? I'd love to be able to give you as much detail as I can, but until the feds do the same, I'm kind of stuck. I deliberately moved this one up in my presentation so I wouldn't end with bad news. So now I'm going to talk about the enacted budget. The budget was enacted on June 20th, signed by the governor on June 20th. As a bit of trivia, it included the fewest number of vetoes I've ever seen on a budget bill. There were 10 of them, 10 line-item vetoes. So it also happens to be the earliest passed budget that I can remember in my career. Highlights for transportation, of course, include the repayment from the general fund of a loan of highway user tax account dollars and other minor transportation funds. This repayment is $351 million and will be split as shown on the presentation, $210 million for the shop, $27 million for maintenance projects, $100 million will go to cities and counties for local transportation projects, $9 million will go to active transportation program, and $5 million to the Environmental Enhancement Program Fund, which is now managed by another department. The budget also includes a reduction to capital outlay support program of $21 million and 210 full-time equivalent positions, but the resources that we received are enough to deliver the new projects that will be funded by the loan repayment. As mentioned, or as detailed in the agency briefing today, there are 2 new cap and trade programs that are going to come our way. I won't go into much detail because I think Chad did a really good brief overview there. Both of these start with a $25 million appropriation in the budget year, and thereafter the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program will receive 10% of cap-and-trade revenues annually, and the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program will receive 5% of the annual revenues. The budget also fully funds Amtrak operations in the state, which is an increase of $10 million over current year. And that's all been accounted for already in our fund estimate, so it has no impact to STIP capacity. I mentioned this year we have a $5 million capacity for aeronautics projects. This is funded in large part by a $4 million transfer from the local airport loan account to the aeronautics account. And of course the budget includes the remaining Prop 1B funds, which are currently estimated at $553 million. As we move forward, we will bring final allocation capacity to the Commission in August, as I mentioned, and obviously we're going to continue to very closely monitor the Federal Highway Trust Fund, and we will be releasing more information as soon as we get it from the U.S. DOT within the next few weeks, because I don't think this Commission is going to meet until just a few days before their current expected shortfall. So we'll be communicating before then. Any questions?
Thank you, Stephen. Questions from colleagues? Commissioner Art.
Where's the $163 million that was supposed to have been added to the 350? Well, it was $337 million plus a few other million in a different, well, slightly different pot, but there was $163 million that was supposed to be in there somewhere.
I don't know about supposed to be. So the Assembly had proposed a different option that included a $500 million expenditure plan, partially funded by the loan. The Senate took a different track and combined through negotiations with the governor and in conference committee, they reverted to the original loan repayment plan.
Oh, so we didn't get the 163 after all that?
And no, there was no increase.
Much ado about nothing.
I also wanted to quote Shakespeare, but you beat me, Commissioner Arp. So, other questions, comments? Okay, Stephen, thank you. Let's move on to
Commissioners.
Oh, of course, Mitch.
If I could,
yeah.
there are a few things I'd like to note. As Stephen talked about in terms of the Federal Highway Trust Fund, they're going to be receiving more information about how the feds are going to handle that. In the past, the department has recommended, and the Commission has taken that recommendation to defer allocations in situations where the reimbursements aren't occurring on a timely manner. So depending on what the feds do, that may be something that we're dealing with at the August Commission meeting. I would also note that a couple of senators in D.C., one's a Democrat, one's a Republican, have proposed an increase to the gas excise tax of 12 cents a gallon over 2 years, and continuing in that bipartisan fashion, both President Obama and the House Majority Leader McCarthy have said they would oppose that. So I'm not holding out a lot of hope for that. The budget trailer bill included some language related to the accounting of a county shares for STIP right-of-way costs. So in the past, the county shares are adjusted at the time of allocation for a final estimate of right-of-way. In the future, there'll be an additional adjustment closeout based on if changes of more than 20% from the closeout to the final estimate. Two more things. As Stephen noted, there is an increase in funding for the active transportation program, so we'll be working with Caltrans to bring forward an amended fund estimate showing the increased amounts for the state piece and also the pieces run by the large MPOs. And lastly, Stephen mentioned the cap and trade and the transit intercity rail program. I would note that the legislation that enacts that program calls for the transportation agency to take on significant pieces of the role that in the past had been performed by Caltrans and the Commission.
Mitch, thank you. Questions of Mitch or Stephen? Hearing none, we'll move forward to the shop fund estimate. Stephen, with a wrap-up by Mitch.
Thank you. So this item is a revision to the shop fund estimate to take into account the early loan repayment that we talked about in the last item, and also CMIA savings that we have realized so far. This revision to the fund estimate is the same as was brought to the Commission at the last meeting. The only change that has occurred in the meantime is that the loan repayment is now enacted in the budget. What it does is adds $210 million to the shop in the 14-15 year, funded by that loan repayment, and $67 million in capacity in the 15-16 year, funded by the CMIA savings. The chart would look something like this, basically adding in the new funding in those 2 years and allowing the department to program projects against these funds and meet fiscal constraint that's required by the Federal Highway Administration. And I would urge the Commission to adopt this fund estimate so that we can begin the work right away.
Mitch, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. Two things. First, I would like to note that the Commission has previously requested that the Department provide a list of the projects that they propose to use the CMIA savings on, so we look forward to receiving that list. And second, staff recommends approval.
Mitch, thank you. Commissioners' feedback to Mitch on seeing that list of proposed projects from CMIA savings, for which we do have a responsibility and a role? Feedback to Mitch? I would concur with that. Stephen, would you like to respond to that?
Oh, we will provide the list.
Good.
It's an easy response.
Thank you very much for your attentiveness on that. And again, we want to see it up front rather than on the back side. Good. Good. With that, do we have a motion? A motion by Commissioner Medaffer, second by Commissioner Taglioni. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That passes unanimously. Thank you, Stephen and Mitch.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Stephen, I hope you're comfortable at the mic. It looks like you're staying. Is that not accurate?
I think we're going to skip one.
Oh, good. Okay, well, don't go too far away. We're going to go to item 15, Garvey bond funding. Then I think that's Gary Watkins, as well as Mitch.
Yes, Commissioners, this item is an annual information item. This is a presentation of the Treasurer's Office analysis of Garvey bonding capacity.
Good afternoon. Annually, the State Treasurer's Office is required to prepare this report in conjunction with the Commission to analyze the bonding capacity for issuing more Garvey debt. I understand that there really is no intention to issue more Garvey debt at this time. Do you still want me to go over our findings?
At this time, staff's not recommending we do additional Garvey. I would note that the Treasurer has prepared a report. It's in your item. It provides a number of scenarios, the highest of which is a capacity of a little over $5 billion. This analysis is prepared as required by statute by looking back at the history of the federal reimbursements over the last 24 months and finding the highest period of 12 months consecutive reimbursements. What staff has recommended is if the Commission chooses to do Garvey in the future, we take a more forward look at the forecast of federal resources based on the fund estimate and look at the size of the shop as the guide. And using the size of the shop in the fund estimate, we estimate a capacity of closer to $3.5 billion. This is consistent with what we presented in the last several years in this item.
Mitch, thank you. Please, Gary, it looks like you wanted to weigh in again.
No, I think that summarized everything. If you have any questions, I can address those.
Questions on Garvey, colleagues? Yes, Commissioner Medaffer.
This doesn't preclude anything from any of the regions. This is strictly for the state, correct? That used Garvey bond?
Yes, California's.
Just California only?
Yes.
Thank you.
They can apply. The regions can. Garvey bonding has in the past been done for the shop, and that was in 2008 and 2004. It was done for the STIP, so it was done for a number of regional projects in the STIP, and it hit their county shares. Because most of the federal funds are in the shop and not in the STIP, the Commission's policy has, or as a matter of practice, has considered Garvey bonding for only shop projects since that initial issuance in 2004.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? Gary, thank you. Mitch, thank you. Methodology for gas and diesel excise tax rate adjustments under the fuel tax swap. I think Stephen Keck is still in the on-deck circle.
I am.
And Mitch as well.
So this will be a short introduction. This item here is a follow-up to the budget and allocation capacity item that I presented at the March 2014 meeting. At that meeting, I reported that the Board of Equalization had adjusted the tax rate for the price-based excise tax downward by 3.5 cents per gallon to 18 cents per gallon. I also reported that the impact of that reduction would be about $500 million in reduced tax collections, which affects both state and local transportation agencies. At that meeting, the Commission had asked whether it was possible for the Department of Finance and or the Board of Equalization to come and give a description or summary of the methodology used to determine that new tax rate. And I believe we have representatives from both here today, and with that I'll yield the podium to folks who know a lot more about it than I do.
Thank you, Stephen. I believe coming forward may be Colby White and Michelle. No? Mystery guest. Please identify yourself.
Actually, to make a correction on that, my name's Joe Fitz. I'm Chief Economist with the Board of Equalization.
Oh, great.
And
Welcome.
I'm here to discuss our part of the fuel tax. Oops. Am I doing that, or? Okay. Of the fuel tax swap. And our role is to do the calculations. I'm sorry. Oh, what happened? There we go. Okay. Do the calculations required by the fuel tax swap. As you probably know, we have a fuel tax swap that started July 1st, 2010. Prior to that, there was a sales and use tax on gasoline, and the state portion of that became an excise tax. So now, in effect, there are two excise taxes on gasoline, the 18-cent excise tax that that does not get adjusted, and then this component that does get adjusted with the swap. So what this means for us is that if gas prices go up more than expected, then the rate must be adjusted upwards. And what we have is we have an annual true-up to the previous fiscal year, so we're looking back to the previous fiscal year. We have a forecast of the upcoming fiscal year of gas prices and volumes. We rely on the Department of Finance for the forecasts of gasoline volumes, and Stephanie Rios will be talking about that. And we use a California price-based forecast. Again, this is done by Department of Finance, but we just update it based on the most recent information from the IHS gasoline price forecast. This rate's set annually by March 1. Our current rate is 39.5 cents per gallon. That's both of those excise taxes. And in a few days, it'll be down to 36 cents per gallon. Here's a pictorial description. We have price times gallons times the rate is our foregone revenue. We take that foregone revenue, divide by gallons. That gives us a forecast excise tax rate. And then we add the true-up to that to get our proposed rate. So it's a relatively simple set of calculations, and it will be revenue neutral, at least over time. This is an example of an underestimation in terms of, in year one, if we underestimate, we essentially make up for that in year three. So there's a bit of a time lag component here. is what is resulting. Here's our actual calculations in terms of the numbers, and I highlighted what we are truing up in terms of the neutrality aspect, in that we take the cumulative difference of $188 million, which was a shortfall, and then we have to make up for that in 2015 and adjust the rate accordingly. So as I mentioned, our rate is 36 cents per gallon. It just happens by coincidence that the rate is 18 cents per gallon as we adjusted it this year. One of the difficulties in doing this from an operational standpoint is that, as you know, gasoline prices have been very volatile in recent years, and this just looks back at the last 10 or 11 years or so just to show you the volatility in gas prices. And one of the difficulties we have is that we have to forecast gas prices for the next fiscal year. And with that kind of volatility, you can imagine it's difficult to have an accurate forecast. The volumes of gasoline gallons are much less variable. They're in the blue. They go up and down a little bit. They've generally been trending down just a little bit. So that's the gasoline tax component. The diesel tax swap is a similar, although mirror image sort of situation, in that there was an excise tax on diesel. This became a sales and use tax. So it's kind of a mirror image sort of situation. And again, it's revenue neutral, just like the gasoline tax swap. There's an annual true-up provision, again, like the gasoline tax swap. Again, we need to forecast the upcoming fiscal year, and also we continue to rely on the Department of Finance for their forecast. So essentially, what we're doing in this case is we're taking the 18-cent diesel tax, and part of that is now a sales and use tax. So we adjust that tax downward, and the way it worked out this year, we adjust it down to 11 cents per gallon. And there's the calculations with regard to that, if you're interested. So at this point, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have. Again, it's revenue neutral over time, and we have to look back and forward in terms of what.
Thank you. Commissioner Arp?
So, if I understand you correctly, the actual adjustment is predicated upon the previous fiscal year?
Well, we look both backwards and forwards. We true up the previous fiscal year because at that point we know exactly what happened, but we still must forecast out to the upcoming fiscal year. So you factor that into some kind of a mathematical formula, or what? I mean, well, it's let me go back here a bit. There are the calculations that we have. We calculate how much the cumulative shortfall has been in the last fiscal year and the prior fiscal years, and then we make a projection of gallons and prices for the upcoming fiscal year and set the rate accordingly to be revenue neutral.
So I'm just trying to reconcile what you're doing this year compared to what we're all experiencing at the pump. So basically, we all know gas is a lot more this year than it was last year. So are we going to see an increase next year then?
Well, it's hard to say what's going to happen next year. It's pretty premature as far as, you know, we're just starting this fiscal year. And you really don't know until pretty late in the process really what's likely to happen. I don't know if Stephanie would be interested in addressing that, but we really don't think beyond what the current rate we've set at this point in time.
So the calculations are basically based on the actual revenue that came in, or the revenue as opposed to what the price may be on at any particular time, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, questions, Commissioner Inman?
Oh, are we going to get a copy of this since we didn't see anything before this very moment?
We can send a copy.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Inman?
I have a question. As the fuels go into the cap and trade, you don't factor tax on tax, do you?
Well, this isn't really related to cap and trade other than the fact that gas prices may be higher. So in that sense, I suppose it would factor in.
So depending on whose estimate, you could have the multiplier effect, so your adjustment could be a larger swing.
The
right?
excise tax is subject to the sales and use tax. So I would assume it's the same with cap and trade, although I don't know for sure.
Okay, other comments or questions? Mitch, did you want to close this up?
We have one more speaker, Stephanie Rios from the Department of Finance.
At least we get something out of Dan.
Stephanie, welcome.
Hi. Do I need to find it? Okay. Okay. So my name is Stephanie Rios with the Department of Finance. Today I'm just going to explain the Department of Finance's responsibilities overall and how we, kind of our role in the fuel tax swap, the information that we provide to the Board of Equalization to actually perform the calculation. So overall, the Financial Research Unit at Department of Finance, we forecast general fund revenue for development of the budget. We also forecast revenues for the budget that include the gasoline excise tax revenue and the increment sales tax on diesel, as well as the diesel excise tax. So we also kind of do an update on the fuel tax swap calculation the same way that BOE is required to calculate it and incorporate any changes that we may see into the budget. So each time in January and May, we update the calculation and adjust the revenue for the special funds as appropriate. Let's see. So what BOE provides to us is gasoline fuel consumption and price data, since they have all of the information based on the returns and the price data that they track, and as well as the diesel fuel consumption, diesel sales tax, and use tax exemptions, and again, price data on diesel fuel. So we're constantly sharing information. They're giving us the actuals. We're feeding it into our forecast, and then we provide them detailed information on the forecast. As Joe mentioned, they use our forecast for gallonage, and I'll go over the specific calculation of how that is incorporated into the revenue neutral calculation. So this will help kind of outline it. So you have two calculations, and they pretty much have to cancel out each other. If they don't, then the BOE modifies the excise tax rate for the offset. So the first equation is the eliminated sales and use tax revenue. So you have gallons consumed. The highlighted items in red are what we receive from BOE. So it's consumed, gallons consumed, average price, which we were starting to talk about, and the sales tax rate, and that's how you derive the revenue that's eliminated. Now that is offset by the new excise tax revenue based on the increment. So as you can notice here, you have gallons consumed in both equations. There is a slight difference, and that difference is for eliminated sales and use tax revenue. Like all related transportation funds historically, there's a 6-month lag because of, in a quarter that you make a calculation, you look at the prior 6 months that data is actually available. So there's a slight difference in gallons consumed in both equations, but for the most part they cancel each other out. The primary driver is the average price. And so the way that we forecast that is we get data from BOE, but we use the same source, which is the U.S. Energy Information Administration, and they track prices on a weekly basis. We also receive a forecast from Global Insight, which Joe had mentioned that BOE does as well, and that forecast is for U.S. Consumer Price Index. And so what our the revenue section is the financial research section. We also have an economic unit section, and they prepare California-specific consumer price index. So that's what we use, and I can tell you some of the things they consider. It's forecasted by taking into account crude oil, retail gas price trends, as well as historical U.S. and California economic relationships. They also consider California energy policy, such as the state's cap and trade regulations. And so EIA and Global Insights, they both, I'm looking at my notes real quick, back in May, expected prices to come down in the short term, but because of California's anticipated higher costs from the state's cap and trade regulation would be passed down to producers and distributors, that we have California gas prices falling at a slower rate. So that's incorporated into our gas price forecast. And we provide that information to BOE. We provide it when we develop the governor's budget, so that's in January, and that's based on November data. And then they incorporate it or make modifications to it for when they actually do the swap calculation, because more data is available by that time. And that's how we work together.
Stephanie, thank you. Mitch, any wrap-up comments before we hear from the Commission? Great. Colleagues? Okay, seeing none, thank you again. Okay, we're going to move on to item 17 then.
At the last commission meeting, it was discussed that the Legislative Analyst Office had come out with a review of the Cap Outlay Support Program. The commission had asked that we invite LAO in to talk about their report and also give Caltrans opportunity to do that. So this is that item.
We do have a speaker card on this, so why don't we hear the presentation first, then we can hear from the public, and then from the Commission. Welcome, and for the record, it's always helpful if you identify yourselves. Thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Jessica Peters with the Legislative Analyst Office, here with my colleague Jeremy Fress. The two of us co-authored the report on the Capital Outlay Support Program review that we understand you wanted to have a presentation on and maybe had some questions about. I believe a copy of our PowerPoint presentation as well as a copy of the report are being handed out to you right now. And we just want to thank you for inviting us here and giving us this opportunity to share with you the work that we've done. So first, let me give you a little bit of background on why we did the report and the process for the COS program review. The legislature actually required us to do the report in collaboration with the Department of Finance and with Caltrans. This was really prompted primarily by legislative concerns about the accountability and the efficiency of the COS program. As you know, the COS program is a staffing program. These are the individuals that do the work to support transportation capital projects for Caltrans. And the budget for the program is about $1.7 billion a year. So this is one of the larger programs in Caltrans, and a lot of the state's transportation dollars going to this purpose. In terms of the program review process, we spent a lot of time working with Caltrans, meeting with stakeholders, visiting districts. And we just want to take this opportunity as well to thank Caltrans, in particular Jim Davis and his staff, who worked with us on the program review. They put in a considerable amount of time and effort into providing information to us as well as the Department of Finance and working with us on the review. We tried to ensure that this review built upon past things that were done. There's been multiple reviews and audits of this program over time. I think the 2011 audit of the program was actually mentioned at your last meeting. The review team did meet with a representative from the auditor's office to ensure that this review wasn't duplicating what they had already done and really was looking at different things or going into a much greater level of detail in order to build off of the findings from their audit as well as other reviews. With such a comprehensive review, many issues about the program were raised. The review team was able to agree on some initial steps on some more minor issues with the program, but we were not able to come to an agreement on some of the major challenges that the program is facing. As a result, the administration put forward their proposals to improve the program as part of the budget process, and we put out the report that you've asked us to come here and talk about. And that report outlines our findings and recommendations on what we felt were the most key issues in the review. Overall, our findings of the COS program are that while Caltrans has made some minor improvements to the program over the past few years, the program continues to have some very significant problems and generally has just been very poorly run. This is resulting in the program not operating efficiently and lacking in accountability. Because of this, we find that significant increases in oversight and budgetary reductions to the program are needed to ensure that the state's limited transportation dollars are used in a cost-effective way. Before we get into what those recommendations for improvements are, I'd like to introduce to you my colleague Jeremy Fress, who's going to walk you through some of the key findings of our report.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. Jeremy Fress with the Legislative Analyst's Office. So coming out of the review, our first finding was there were data challenges in the COS program that limited our ability to evaluate the program's effectiveness. This was for two main reasons. The first being that while Caltrans does maintain a large amount of data on individual projects, data related to budgets, schedule, and project scope, and past expenditures, within this data we found a prevalence of errors and inaccuracies. And just to provide one example, in our district site visits, project managers presented information about their projects that was inconsistent with data in the COS program systems. At the time, Caltrans acknowledged that the data in the system was inaccurate. And the second reason is that we found that some essential information needed to evaluate the effectiveness of the COS program was not collected or maintained. So examples of this data include detailed staffing and workload data to compare the classification of staff in the program with the type of workload in the program and to see any imbalances there. Information on how districts expend staff resources in order to evaluate the accuracy of their budget estimates. And initial and updated estimates for projects' cost, scope, and schedules. These estimates, as they're updated, the estimates are overwritten, so we couldn't see the initial or previous estimates on these items. Our next finding from the review was that the annual COS budget request to the legislature limits the ability of the legislature to effectively oversee the COS program. Specifically, we found that the annual budget request provided to the legislature is a poor estimate of the program's staffing needs. Now, this budget request is based on an aggregation of all the staff resources needed for each project in the program. And, you know, as I just mentioned in the previous slide, Caltrans does not collect data on the amount of FTE resources that districts actually expend on the projects. But we were able to, by using project expenditure data, we were able to perform an analysis of the accuracy of the budget request, taking a sample of 1,200 projects from the 12-13 budget. We compared the amount of staff resources that were provided with how those resources were expended. Now, as we can see in the chart, our analysis shows that for the majority of projects, 60%, that would be the portion of the pie chart on the right, 60% of the 1,200 projects overestimated by more than 25% the staff resources that would be needed for those projects. And on the bottom left, 23% of the projects underestimated by more than 25%. And so, you know, these are estimates, and we would expect the estimates to not be 100% correct. We would expect some to be above, some to be below, and for those to even out. What we're seeing, or what we saw in our analysis, was that the estimates that overestimate what was needed far outweigh the estimates that underestimated what was needed. So digging into this analysis a little bit deeper, on this chart we see the specific FTEs requested and used. So for the pie chart, the 60% of projects that overestimated, we see on the left two columns approximately 3,100 FTEs were requested, and about 1,100 FTEs were actually used. So the difference we're seeing is approximately 2,000 FTEs. And looking overall at the sample, we found that the program expended 73% of the staff resources that were provided to the program. We would just note that the administration performed a separate but similar analysis on a different sample of projects. The administration found a 68% expenditure rate, so similar to our finding. And so what we're seeing then is that the budget process limits the legislature's oversight because the budget request overestimates staff needed, and also there's not a requirement that Caltrans report to the legislature on how resources provided are actually expended. So moving on to our next finding. Previously we were discussing the budgeting process. Now we're moving on to an assessment of staffing needs in the program. And given the previous findings that the COS data in the program is unreliable, that the budget request is a poor estimate of staffing needs, in order to perform this assessment of staffing levels, we had to use macro-level transportation data. As you know, Commissioners, transportation funding has peaked over the past 7 years due to Proposition 1B, due to ARA funds. And so we took an average of the level of transportation funding from data that Caltrans provided to our office during the review. We took an average over the past 7 years. This takes into account the funding ramp-up period, the peak a couple years ago, and the beginning of decline that we're currently seeing. And this also takes into account that the workload in the COS program occurs before and after allocation. And this comparison, looking at the past 7-year average, looking at projections from Caltrans of funding levels for the next few years, comparing these averages, we see that starting in 2014-15, the level of funding will decline by approximately 40%. Now, as the workload in the COS program is directly related to the level of transportation funding, we find that workload will decline by a similar amount. Specifically, we find that the program is overstaffed by roughly 3,500 FTEs, and this equates to a cost to the state of more than $500 million a year. And we understand that addressing overstaffing issues in any state department is a very challenging issue, but in this case, the cost to the state on an annual basis is so high, and with such a great need for transportation funding in this state, that we think this is an issue that needs to be considered. It's our understanding, finally, that in the last meeting there was a discussion about levels of staffing pre-funding peak and during the peak. We took this into account during our review. And the governor's budget shows that during the peak period, the program reduced by 1,300 FTEs. So over the past 7 years, the program reduced by that amount. And the fact that the program was able to reduce its staffing levels during this peak workload period is an indication or further indication that there's a disconnect in the program between staffing levels and levels of workload, and further that the program was overstaffed entering the peak workload period. My colleague, Ms. Peters, will provide our last finding and our recommendations. Thank you.
So our last finding actually directly relates to the Transportation Commission, and so we hope that you will find this one particularly interesting. It also relates to accountability. That was one of the things that we were asked to look at in the program review. I think there's been a lot of attention on the efficiency and the dollars and the staffing issues, and we think those are important issues, but we think that the accountability is as important, if not more important, in terms of the long-term effectiveness of this program. Specifically, what we found is that project-level external accountability is very limited, in particular for the shop. If we take a step back and look at other capital outlay programs or projects in the state or other state DOTs, most of them have a common delivery model where the department or the project sponsor comes up with the need for the project and then contracts with another entity, be it public or private, to actually do the technical work, the engineering, and some of the actual project work. Under that type of an arrangement, there's some inherent checks and balances built into that system. You have a separation between the entities that are wanting the project and the entity doing the work, where the project sponsor is going to hold their consultant accountable and make sure that the project gets delivered within the agreed upon cost, scope, and schedule. And the contract will usually have remedies and arrangements in it that ensure that the consultant performs according to the contract contractor provides the department with a remedy if they don't. And as a result, you have a lot of checks and balances built into that system inherently. Caltrans uses a very different delivery model where they essentially use their own staff rather than contracting with a separate entity. I think the department even likes to call this, or in the past has called this, their internal consultants. And so really what you have is both functions, the project sponsor function as well as the technical consultant work function being performed, so to speak, under the same roof by the same department. And under that delivery model, that really lacks the checks and balances that other capital outlay projects would have, because there is no separation between the entities and there is no contractual arrangement. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the state should come up with a different delivery model for Caltrans, but what it does mean is that external accountability of Caltrans and of this program is that much more important. And I think, as we all know, having some level of external accountability for government programs is important anyways, but it's even more important for Caltrans than it might be for other state DOTs or for other state capital projects. Despite the fact that it's so important, the state has very limited external accountability over Caltrans, in particular for the shop. We looked at with certain STIP projects, you have a local partner. They are looking at the cost, scope, and schedule. They're ensuring that the project they want gets built. You have some accountability built into that. With the shop, this is all internal to Caltrans. And while the commission, you have a role in this, it's fairly narrowly scoped. And when you look at the big picture, there's certain gaps in the accountability and in terms of your role. And really, this results in the state not having a robust system of holding Caltrans accountable for shop projects in a meaningful way. We don't fault the commission for this. We think obviously the commission's process, the public transparency, the expertise that you all bring to the state's transportation issues, and the quality of your staff are all excellent assets to the state. The issue here really is state law. It doesn't authorize you or doesn't set you up in a way to have this very complete and robust role in terms of holding Caltrans accountable. So in order to address the findings of the report, we make two categories of recommendations. I think slide number 7, we outline the budgetary recommendations that we make would be to begin to align staffing with workload and bring these dollars for staffing and projects back into balance. We advised the legislature during budget hearings that this is a very difficult thing for them to do. Commissioners, as you know, the state only has so many transportation dollars, and the state and the legislature have to decide how many dollars should be allocated for staffing to support projects and how many of those dollars are going to go to actually purchase materials and pay construction workers to build the projects. Now, it's very difficult for the legislature to figure out where to draw that line and how to make those allocations, because as we noted earlier, the data from Caltrans is very poor, and the information that comes to the legislature doesn't give them a good sense of what is really actually needed in terms of staffing. And so this is a really difficult problem for them to address. Accordingly, we would recommend to the legislature that they take a very thoughtful and multi-year approach to ramping down the staffing in the program. Obviously, one could think that if we find that they're overstaffed by 3,500 positions, that's a cost to the state of $500 million. That's a lot of money. You want to ensure that that money is being used well. I think some folks maybe even misunderstood our report and thought, you should cut that in the first year. We don't think that, actually. We think that, we acknowledge our estimate's a rough estimate. And we think that this is a problem that is so significant that really does need to be addressed over multiple years. In order to help the legislature and the state to refine the estimates of how much overstaffing there really is, we recommend that the legislature require Caltrans to come up with a realistic multi-year staffing plan that actually looks at what workload they're going to have and what staffing they have in a more realistic way than the information that's been provided in the past. And our last category of recommendations, again, relate to the commission. And this would be really just to ramp up your role in creating a robust framework of accountability, holding Caltrans accountable for the delivery of SHOP projects and their use of state funds. Specifically, we recommend that the Commission approve individual SHOP projects instead of approving the SHOP as a program. I think we envision something similar to what you did on Proposition 1B with the baseline agreements, really getting a sufficient amount of information on the cost, scope, and schedule of the project to know what the state's committing its dollars to. We also recommend that you allocate COS funds for SHOP projects. The power of the purse strings is a powerful thing, and allocating funding for the whole project rather than just the capital would be a huge step in the right direction. And we recommend that in this new role that we recommend that you would report on Caltrans project delivery performance. As my colleague noted, it is currently impossible to tell what Caltrans planned to do and what they actually did on their program of projects, to know how well they are achieving what they plan to do on projects. Are projects coming in over budget, under budget? Are they taking longer? Are they being done on time? It's not possible to tell from the information. We think that the Commission be well suited to report on that. When taken together, we think these recommendations will lead to a more efficient and effective use of state dollars and more transportation improvements that actually get out on the street, literally. It would also bring much needed transparency and accountability to this program, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have on the report.
Jessica and Jeremy, thank you for joining us today and for the overview of the program, as well as the hard copy of that. Why don't we hear from Jim Davis, and then we can hear from our colleagues on the Commission. Jim, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Gardino and Commissioners. My name is Jim Davis, and I'm the Division Chief of Project Management. I'm also the COS Program Manager. I'm going to address the LAO recommendations through focusing on 3 topic areas. Topic 1, COS data. Topic 2, staffing levels. And Topic 3, SHOP accountability and transparency. First, we agree that Caltrans must continue to improve and are actively doing so with regards to COS data. That was one of the reasons we were implementing our new project management resource and scheduling tool called PRISM. It replaces our 17-year-old legacy system. Addressing the data quality issue, we were in the middle of implementing PRISM and data conversion as our program review was going on. This was communicated as a risk when we started the review, and our data is now converted. Implementing new business processes with PRISM to take advantage of the tool's capability to advance us in management practices. One of these is a baseline, which will document the original budget. We just implemented baselines with all the new 2014 STIP and SHOP projects. As part of the ZBB program review, we agreed in the governor's budget to implement a number of estimating and accountability improvements. I'll touch briefly on 3 of those. The first is developing a predictive tool for developing a range of estimates. It's to help us improve our budgets. Second, clarify change control rules. These rules provide clear direction when a project change request is needed for support changes. We do have a project change request process and have had one since 1992 to manage scope, schedule, and cost changes. This action will improve that process. We're also developing a quality management plan for data. The QMP will document and enhance our current HQ, headquarters, and district annual budget review process. This chart illustrates a typical project and the years to deliver on the horizontal axis. The pink slice, or the shaded slice, represents a fiscal year slice of a project where BY is budget year on the bottom. Capital projects and support are multi-year endeavors. Very few of our projects can be done in just 1 year. We manage our projects by component, P&ED, PS&E, right-of-way, and construction, and the life of the project. Our cost and budget controls are set up by component and life of project, not by fiscal year. The department builds each project budget through a bottoms-up process with the team members assessing the scope of work and determine the appropriate hours to deliver that work. The predictive tool I talked about on the previous slide will use recent historical information as well as a predictive cost drivers to provide a tops-down approach to use in conjunction with existing teams based, bottoms-up based approach to developing better estimates. The COS annual budget request is based on fiscal year slice of over 2,500 projects. Our budget is comprised of pieces of each one of these projects. Our project information is updated continually, and we pull statewide data on January 9th to give us the best data possible for our annual request. The legislature does not provide a specific appropriation for each project each year, but rather makes a single appropriation to Caltrans for the entire COS program. This is primarily intended to allow Caltrans the ability to manage changes that can occur on projects throughout the year, as well as projects that need to be added. Those could be things like storm damage, safety, or emergency. We deliver complex projects in a challenging regulatory environment. We expect deviations in fiscal year from what our request was. We do, however, have internal cost controls in place by component and life of project. This chart illustrates our historical staffing, consultants, and state staff, the fiscal years at the bottom, our forecasted workload, and temporary programs. The temporary programs are at the bottom, represent Seismic Prop 192, TCRP, the toll bridge, ARA, Prop 1B. Now we need to add the early loan repayment and CMIA savings. Caltrans provides a 5-year look-ahead multi-year staffing plan as part of our budget request each January. Our workload is comprised of primarily SHOP, STIP, and partnership projects, which includes measures. We have proposed the lowest level staffing in 17 years. Staffing has been reduced 3,200 to pre-temporary program levels, and I can see that by that chart by looking at the red line at our current staffing level versus where we were back in 1997 and 98. It is important to note that this request does not include resources to build a shelf of projects. We have constantly reduced staffing as transportation funding has decreased. In the upcoming years, barring any new revenues, Caltrans anticipates workload decreasing slightly and flattening out as the Proposition 1B and toll programs are completed. We essentially are getting to a stable workload based on current transportation funding levels. The department believes in continuous improvement, and to illustrate this point, I want to look at the last few years and what we've done with regards to the SHOP to improve our management of our COS program. In 2008, we started programming all 4 COS components, P&ED, PS&E, right-of-way, and construction, as was done in the STIP. In 2010, we started reporting completed project costs. In 2011, we implemented 20 BSA recommendations. These included performance measures, COS directives, business processes, even a legislative proposal that ended up with Senate Bill 1102. In 2013, we implemented our new project management tool, PRISM. In 2014, we started reporting construction support at the time of allocation. Also, we've agreed to implement many program ZBB review recommendations. I would also be remiss if I did not tell you that accountability and transparency are so important to the department that we have implemented a vision statement that states that we want to be a performance-driven, transparent, and accountable organization. On this slide are 6 accountable and transparency documents that contain project and program data we produce and share with the Commission and the Legislature. The first is the SHOP 10-year plan, and it identifies our program goals, costs, and outcomes. The second document is the 4-year SHOP program document, which identifies the projects, scope, schedule, and costs to achieve the outcomes in the SHOP 10-year plan. The contract for delivery document is our yearly project commitment on project milestones, schedules, and costs. On our quarterly project delivery report, which is information item 34 on today's agenda, and it documents our progress in meeting our contract for delivery commitments, as well as a report on completed project costs. On page 18 and page 21, we identify completed STIP and shop support costs compared to budget. It shows we expended 86% of our project budget on completed projects this year, both on STIP and shop projects. The annual project delivery report to the legislature includes the fourth quarter project delivery report to the Commission and a number of performance measures that we agreed upon based on the BSA audit in 2011. Our mile micro report, which I believe Director Doherty shared with you, is intended to be our plain language report on our performance. Caltrans headquarters does perform oversight on the district COS program. Rachel Falsetti and myself meet quarterly with the districts to review projects, schedule, scope, and cost changes. In addition, headquarters performs many quality review checks of the annual budget request to ensure we provide a reasonable budget request. The next two slides come from our mile marker report. The first is on our project delivery performance. Through the contract for delivery, we have committed to the delivery of specific projects, which has increased our accountability and transparency. We've also heard that we are not taking enough risk and are too conservative. So we are responding to this criticism through taking more intelligent and agreed upon risks to deliver projects faster. This will not always result in 100% delivery, and that's okay, as long as it ends with the goal of faster project delivery. This next slide recognizes that COS resources are used to achieve SHOP program outcomes and goals. These two graphs are included in our recent released mile marker report, focused on state pavement and bridge health. In conclusion, Caltrans believes that its annual budget request is reasonable and adequately supported. The COS program adjusts staffing up and down based on available transportation funding. Caltrans is accountable and transparent in the management and delivery of projects to achieve transportation outcomes. However, we recognize that to achieve organizational excellence, we must continually improve and are committed to working with you to do so. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Jim Davis. We have at least one card from the public who would like to comment on this. Keith Dunn with the Self-Help Counties Coalition. If we have other speakers, please not only fill out your card, but please line up now so that we don't lose time in transition on any comments. After Keith speaks, we will hear from Commission colleagues.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Keith Dunn with the Self-Help Counties Coalition. And I have a statement I'd just like to present and then answer any questions you might have. I've shared some documents with you. This is a dialogue that has been ongoing with the department and with the new state agency, and hopefully you have copies of those with you. Just wanted to illustrate that this is not an issue that has just been discussed today. It's been one that's been ongoing. Self-Help County member agencies have been working in cooperation with Caltrans for years to advance important transportation initiatives together. We've constructed multi-billion-dollar improvement projects statewide. And as the primary funding sources for state highway improvements have shifted to the regional agencies, we observe that there are three major challenges to meeting our common goals: responsiveness, accountability, and the alignment of risk and responsibilities. As the budgets of the state and federal levels continue to tighten, self-help member agencies control much of the scarce transportation funding to be invested in projects up and down the state. This relationship that is ongoing with self-help counties and Caltrans is one that must be constructive and recognize the skills and talents of each other. With regard to the LAO report, the budget for the fiscal year is approximately $1.6 billion, which allows Caltrans to deliver its commitment for SHOP and STIP. The other programs as well, one being the bridge program and other smaller programs. As it's been discussed, the toll seismic retrofit program and the 1B program is nearing completion, and the forecast SHOP and STIP programs can only sustain a fraction of the present COS level as those programs go away. It's unlikely that there will be any agreement today on whether the COS is overstaffed, and if so, by how much. But based on the current fund estimate and future projections for SHOP and STIP funding, we believe that the COS program is probably overstaffed, resulting in less state investment in projects in those programs. In light of the significant CTIP efforts to develop effective revenue sources, we suggest that ensuring expenditure efficiencies in the delivery program is essential while we collectively tackle the political heavy lift that's going to be needed to either implement a VMT or other transportation funding sources. Any reform of the Caltrans project delivery function should include a redefined level of responsibility. With STIP and SHOP accounting for only 1/2 of the current COS budget, Caltrans must reevaluate the current size of its organization and focus its priorities to a narrower range of responsibilities. Self-help counties and its member agencies look forward to continuing to partner with the department and the new agency in developing and implementing a plan that focuses on properly aligning funds with roles, risks, and responsibilities in order to improve collectively how we deliver transportation services and maintain our high quality of infrastructure here for the citizens of California. And with that, I just would like to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions of Keith? Hearing none, let's thank you, Keith, very much for weighing in. Commission colleagues, Commissioner
Arp? Thank you. I appreciate both reports. Just so I have a little bit better context, this is probably a similar presentation to the one you gave to the legislature recently, and I assume Caltrans' response was similar at that one. I don't know if the Secretary of Transportation has given a response or has a position on this. Can you enlighten us on that?
Not at this point. So I don't.
Not as in you can't enlighten us, or
I can't enlighten you on that.
You cannot enlighten me. So okay.
Okay.
Just wanted to be. Thank you. Do we, just in terms of how Caltrans handles staffing, do you have constraints in your collective bargaining agreements that govern some of that, or not?
Certainly, we're bound by a number of labor agreements, but specifically what on reducing. I want to back up for a minute. The question that you asked previously about does the Secretary have a position on it, our proposal first goes through Department of Finance, and they speak for the administration. Our proposal was approved with some modifications, and that's what was presented to the legislature. So I would say that that what we put forward for 14-15 is something that was vetted within the administration, and they support our request. And obviously the legislature did too, because at the end of the day, the recommendation that the analysts put forward was not adopted. Certainly there's room for improvement, and we've demonstrated that we have bent over backwards to provide information, but the recommendation that we're significantly overstaffed is not something that we support, and neither did the legislature. Our budget goes forward to the legislature every year. We provide a lot of information. We've added information over and over again. We provide information to the commission. And so to say that we're not trying to be accountable or transparent, obviously room for improvement, but we do not agree with the recommendations.
Thank you, Norma. And what about in terms of the on the SHOP program, we do get the 10-year list, which is sort of a thumbs up or down on the whole program. There's not really a lot of opportunity to examine specific projects. What is Caltrans' position on a recommendation that there be more oversight on that particular piece?
I certainly we're open for discussion on that, whether it's the recommendation that's specifically outlined here. We're not sure about that, and there's an aspect of this in some of the legislation that you discussed today, and we don't have an approved position yet from the administration. But we are looking, as part of the SSTI report, as part of the program review, we've been looking at making improvements in that area, and we've made commitments to provide more transparency and accountability in how we select our projects. A lot of it is also as was mentioned earlier, a lot of the shop is federally funded, and there's performance requirements at the federal level that we also have to adhere to.
Thank you. I appreciate your information on that. This is a complex issue in my view, and there's probably no simple. I mean, some of the recommendations, whether you agree with LAO or not, even if we agreed with them, would be difficult to implement or to figure out how you would implement those. And so I think it does require us all collectively in this, what I consider to be a very adverse environment for transportation funding overall. We're in a very pivotal time. Most of us in the transportation community recognize that. So, you know, we with the difficulty that we have in securing additional funding from those who pay the bill, that is the taxpayers, I think it's important for us to be able to go forth and present to taxpayers that we have done everything possible to make the dollars that we have the most efficiently executed. And I think there's probably room for improvement in all sectors on that, and I think we just need to continue to figure out how we skin that cat. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from commissioners? Commissioner Medaffer and Commissioner Taglioni? Oh, okay. Commissioner Medaffer and Commissioner Inman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a brief observation, and I agree with Commissioner Arp. This is an issue that I think the LAO has raised some interesting things, and I respect the opinions on both sides. And obviously, the legislature is addressing this, and I'm sure at some point, as indicated, the administration will weigh in. But to that end, what in government or frankly in the private sector, I think it's always healthy that there is third-party oversight, that there is transparency. And clearly, as Commissioner Arp indicated, in this day and age of dwindling resources, and especially as various funding mechanisms will be explored to help finance transportation going forward, it is incumbent upon Caltrans, it's incumbent upon the legislature, the administration, and ultimately, and CTC as well, to give the greatest degree of confidence to the public and the taxpayers that they are getting the very best for their dollar.
Thank you, Commissioner Medaffer. Commissioner Inman.
I want to just agree with what my colleagues have said, and I appreciate both perspectives. I think it's difficult sitting in what I'll call a manager's position, and we're in the business of transportation. It's difficult to hear two very different perspectives looking at the same discussion. So we have to be respectful of the fact that there's always two sides of every story, and there's externalities, and it's complicated. The length of the time it took for you all to do your analysis, I think, kind of speaks to the complication. If we flash back to one of our earlier agenda items on the gas tax swap and some complications, it seems like we do make things very, very complicated. But I, too, just want to reinforce the need for each and every one of us. It doesn't matter what role you play. We have to be good stewards of absolutely every precious dollar and deliver value. And I think that, my major concern with this is the agreement that we didn't have good data. So I don't know how anybody can make good decisions without good data. And you did explain that you were in a transition, and often when you go from one system to the next. But I think it behooves all of us to really figure out a way so that we can have good information to make good decisions on. I think that, the overstaff question, I think it's more a question, do we have the right folks doing the right jobs and we're avoiding redundancy? So I think it's difficult if we just try to say, this is X amount, because we could be right on target with the right number, but have the wrong folks doing the wrong things at the wrong time, and we really wouldn't achieve our mutual goals. So I think we're all looking at what our mutual collective future will be in terms of how do we fund infrastructure and provide mobility whether it's to our communities, our individuals, or the movement of goods and services. So I just want to behoove everybody to really, let's put on the same jerseys and agree that we all love the state, and what can we do to really move across the gold line, I think, of really getting the biggest bang for absolutely every dollar that we have, and then we can have the conversations about how we can maybe have a few more dollars. But as Commissioner Arp said, it's really, really hard to be out there, those of us that have day jobs in the private sector and are champions for transportation funding. When we hear these kind of discussions going on, it's difficult for all of us to sell our story of we need more money.
Jessica and Jeremy, thank you for joining us today. I want to give you an opportunity for any final comments that you'd like to make.
Thank you for having us here, and we're happy to continue to work with you and continue to work with your staff. And I think the goal of our report, first of all, we're required to review the program, but the goal is always improvements going forward, and part of how we do that is by laying out the problems that we currently see. But I think we would agree with some of the comments the commissioners have made on how to improve the program going forward, and that really being the goal, and improving our transportation systems and getting the funding levels right. So.
Great. My thanks again to you both. Jim Davis, any closing comments?
The department agrees that we need to continue to improve, and we're working to do so, and we'll work with you on that.
Great. Thank you all again for joining us. Let's move forward with item 18, our 2014 Active Transportation Program update. Laurel?
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. This is an information item to provide an update on the competitive active transportation program and the first round of programming. The guidelines for this new program were adopted at the March CTC meeting, and applications for this first round were due May 21st. We've received 771 applications, with requests totaling a little over $1 billion. Based on the preliminary review so far, there are many applications for safe routes to schools, projects in disadvantaged communities, so we should have absolutely no trouble meeting the statutory requirements for those. The applications have been distributed to the evaluation volunteers. Those members are listed on attachment to the book item. They're evaluating and scoring these even now. They've been returning scores already to the department as they complete them. So I just want to let you know that in setting up these evaluation groups, we did accept all volunteers that came forward, with the exception of those who would have a conflict as contractors, and that would be the Conservation Corps. So we began that solicitation back in January, and that continues. If anybody is interested in being an alternate, we're taking those names, and we will, of course, continue to take names for the next cycle. Staff intends to release recommendations for programming by August 8th, with the hope that we can adopt the program at the August CTC meeting. Do you have any questions?
Great. Commission colleagues, any questions? Okay. And we see no cards on this item as well. Laurel, Mitch, David, thank you for your continued good work on this. Moving on to item 19, amendment to the 2014 Active Transportation Program guidelines for MPOs, competitive project selection. Laurel?
Yes, Commissioners, so this is an action item to approve and adopt the amendments to the 2014 ATP guidelines proposed by Fresno Council of Governments, San Joaquin Council of Governments, and Tulare County Association of Governments. These amendments are to selection criteria and weighting, minimum project size, match requirement, definition of disadvantaged community, and supplemental call for projects. These are the areas where the MPOs have discretion to develop their own guidelines. As you can see in the item, Fresno is requesting to use their own guidelines for selection criteria and weighting, minimum project size, match requirement, and supplemental call for projects. San Joaquin is requesting only to do the supplemental call for projects, and Tulare is requesting to use their own guidelines for selection criteria and definition of disadvantaged community. Of the 9 large MPOs, we have done 4 of them last time. That would be SCAG, San Diego, Sacramento, and MTC. And then these 3 this time. And we have 2 that have not proposed any of their own. That would be Kern and Stanislaus. So this will be the last item that you see like this. Staff recommends that you adopt these amendments and approve this item.
That's a motion by Commissioner Madaffer. Is there a second? Sure. A second by Commissioner Arp. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. I have 2:30. This is a kinder, gentler commission to give you a chance to stretch and bio break, so we're going to take 10 minutes. We'll start again at 2:40. Thank you.